Welcome, welcome, welcome. If you all are here for the Community Power Network, you are in the right space. Um, as usual, we welcome folks to come on camera if they like. We love to see your beautiful faces. This space is an interactive space, right? And so, yes, we get into a lot of content, but it's really about the people, right? And having what Lamont would call courageous conversations with one another in community. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm seeing some new faces in the room, so this has me super excited. Let's get into it. If you all have not met me before, my name is Nastasia Moore. I work alongside a brilliant team of coaches and consultants and TA providers in this space to host this wonderful Community Power Network. We have a lot in store for today. Because I see so many new faces, if you all would just go ahead and drop your names, your pronouns, your racial identity, and your organization, we would highly, highly appreciate it. Name, pronouns, racial identity. Oh yeah, and where are you at on the map? Nice, 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 nice. Good deal. So while you all are introducing yourselves, let's go through what our journey for today is. So as always, can't start or do business without properly doing a landing labor acknowledgement. Um, for those of you who are newer, we do it for the culture segment. I'll save it for the do it for the culture segment, but it's pretty exciting. This month we are honoring and celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. So we'll get into it. We'll do a recap of last session. And then we're going to get into what Lamont would call, oh, juicy. Okay, so we're going to be talking about community-based social marketing, right? And so Ms. Chris Hollis is going to facilitate what that may look like in community and what that may look like for us. For those of you who haven't even thought about what community-based social marketing is. And so really excited about that piece. So if you all are with me and you are okay with the run of show for today, I just need some reactions. I just need some hearts, some thumbs, something to know that folks are still with. Cool, 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 cool. Nice. I love it. Thank y'all. All right. Remember what I said. We cannot do business without doing a land acknowledgement. I would like to pass this to my beautiful friend and colleague, Miss Lori, to lead us off with our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Nastasia, and thank you for the vibes. Rest in power, Frankie Beverly. Thank you for letting us enter into this space together with the beautiful voice of his. Maiku aloha mai, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see beautiful faces, hear the energy in the chat, and feel our spirits come into alignment with others for our time together for the Community Power Network. For those of you who are new to our community, my name is Lori Pampilo Harris. I identify as she, her, Oya. Oya reflects my Native Hawaiian indigenous identity. I'm also a descendant of the Mandaya Muslim clan of Mindanao, Philippines. And today and every day, as part of the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub team and in starting our Community Power Network time together, we recognize that the land we each are on is Native land. We begin each of our CPNs with this acknowledgement. This is not symbolism. This is a true intention that we speak with our words, we set our intentions towards. And so if there's ever an opportunity for all of you to share your land acknowledgement, we would love to have you do that instead of ours. If you also want to put the native land that you are currently on in the chat as part of where you are located, we would appreciate that also. Would anybody like to come off of mute and read the land acknowledgement for us today? Don't be shy. Come on off mute.
I'm off mute.
I'll read it.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay. Yeah. Today, we would like to begin by acknowledging the indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land and resources, which we each call home, but is and always will be native land. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all Indian tribes and tribal nations. Despite centuries of genocide and occupation, the Native people continue as vibrant and resilient tribes, bands, and rancherias. Today, we celebrate our tribal neighbors as the ancestral stewards of this land and honor their sustained existence. As we begin this virtual session together, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. These sovereign people have been caretakers of the area since time immemorial. Let's take a moment to honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. And during each CPN, we put an equal importance and value by sharing a labor acknowledgement where we respectfully acknowledge our debt to the enslaved people of African descent whose stolen labor and suffering built and grew the economy and infrastructure that we are all benefiting from. And it's also a country that has refused to recognize their humanity even into today. Would someone please come off mute and share the labor acknowledgement by reading it from the slide?
Labor acknowledgement. We humbly acknowledge and honor the profound contributions of enslaved individuals, predominantly of African descent, whose unwavering labor and endurance forged the foundation upon which our nation stands today. Their toil and suffering endured amidst the brutality of chattel slavery and the insidious legacy of Jim Crow shaped the very fabric of our society, propelling its growth and prosperity. Therefore, we stand in solidarity with the descendants of the enslaved, bearing witness to the enduring repercussions of their oppression and vowing to dismantle the systems of inequity that continue to perpetuate their marginalization and exclusion.
Yeah.
It is incumbent upon us to acknowledge their labor, honor their sacrifice, and act.
Roosevelt, you got muted.
Got muted for that last sentence, Roosevelt.
The last sentence? Okay, just a sec. People keep up. It is incumbent upon us to acknowledge their labor, honor their sacrifice, and actively work towards a future rooted in justice, equity, and collective healing.
Thank you, Roosevelt. And so we would encourage you all, if your organization does not have a land and labor acknowledgement, to work with your tribal nation leaders, those who are a part of the Black liberation movement and those seeking reparations, to work with them to create your own land and labor acknowledgement, and then also find ways to invest back into those communities that they are representing is one significant way other than these acknowledgements that we're expressing. But let us all take a deep breath. Let us focus our intentions on those that this acknowledgement has brought forth. And let's send them the goodness, the joy, and the peace that they each deserve, and all of us. Thank you.
Beautifully done. Thank you. Thank you. All right, y'all. Let's get into Do It for the Culture. You all, we do a Do It for the Culture segment every month during the community of practice. This month we are, let me back up. We do this work for the culture, and bringing in the element and to acknowledge and celebrate different cultures other than our own is very important in this space. And this month is Hispanic Heritage Month. And so we want to lean into that. We're going to watch a short clip on celebrating the importance of celebrating culture, the importance of celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and then we'll talk about it.
Why do we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month? Because not all of us get to learn about our heritage at home.
We're not told about anything in school.
Because people are harassed for speaking Spanish.
Because our culture has been washed away for too long.
even by our own people.
This country is built on immigration. Hispanics make up more than 17% of the population. That's over 57 million Americans.
So chances are you've crossed paths with someone of Hispanic descent. Why do we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month?
Porque no todos somos mexicanos. Hay otras culturas, países y lenguas que tenemos que aprender a apreciar.
To celebrate and highlight our accomplishments and influence on our American culture.
We are not going anywhere. So might as well embrace it and learn more about our diverse cultures. And because we gave you tacos. De nada.
From September 15th
To October 15th,
The United States celebrates
Puerto Ricans,
Dominicans,
Cubanos,
Mexicanos.
Salvadorians. It started as just a week
under President Lyndon Johnson.
in 1968.
and was expanded to 30 days by President Ronald Reagan.
thank you.
Why does it start in the middle of September?
September 15th is the anniversary of independence of
5 Latin American countries.
Costa Rica, El Salvador.
Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua.
Also, Mexico and Chile celebrate their independence days on September 16th and September 18th. It gets pretty complicated,
Because Hispanic is not a race.
It's an ethnicity.
although the official name is Hispanic Heritage Month.
Many of us don't identify as Hispanic beyond census forms.
although I do, but a lot of my friends don't, and they shouldn't have to be grouped into that.
Hispanic is someone who is a native or descends from a Spanish-speaking country. So Latino, Latina is someone of Latin American origin. This includes Brazil, but excludes Spain. Afro-Latino is someone who comes from a Latin American country and is an Afro-descendant. I'm not Spanish, I'm Latina.
What's the most frustrating misconception of being Latinx?
Do you like tacos? Do you eat spicy food? Yes, of course, I like spicy food and tacos, but that's not what our heritage is about.
Everywhere I go, it's automatically rice and beans. There's more to it than just rice and beans.
Everyone assumes I speak Spanish and I'm Catholic, but I'm Muslim and I speak Arabic.
One of the things that most annoys me when people tell me I don't look Puerto Rican. But you don't look Puerto Rican.
You, Mexican?
There's no way. But you're white.
I'm white, I look white, but I'm also half Puerto Rican, and that's a big deal and should be celebrated just as much.
How could you be a Latina if you're white?
Que sí, pendejo. Just like here, Mexico is very diverse, and that is one of its many beauties.
It's crazy that people assume that if you speak Spanish, you're not a US citizen.
I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. I am American.
Yo nací en un territorio estadounidense, así que soy ciudadana estadounidense, and I take my civic duties very seriously.
Sometimes people ask me, wow, how did you get here? Like as if Hispanic people don't take planes to come to America.
Why do people feel the need to comment on your accent? Sometimes they say, oh, your accent's so good, as if it was a good thing. And then sometimes they're like, oh, I can hear your accent. What does that even mean? Did you know that people were speaking Spanish in the US before English? Ponce de Leon got to where he dubbed La Florida in 1513, way before any settlers went to Jamestown. Colorado, Florida, Nevada, Montana, Montaña, those are all Spanish names. Our heritage is about celebrating culture, it's about celebrating beauty, it's about remembering where we're from and being proud of being immigrants in this country.
We need to remember our roots. We need to take the time to remember where we come from.
There are over 50 million people in the US that speak Spanish. That is more people than in Spain. That is the second largest population of Spanish speakers outside of Mexico. The United States dancing abilities would be way lower if there weren't Latinos here.
But I can dance, because every Latino can dance.
Cubanos.
All right, so I love the clip. It shows how Hispanic and hello. Just a second. All right, so I love this clip because it shows how our Hispanic and Latino sisters and brothers have played a huge role in shaping, you know, our country. The Hispanic and Latino culture has contributed to many areas when we think about our politics, when we think about civil rights, when we think about our arts, right? And so we take this month to recognize and celebrating the impact that this culture has had on our culture, our politics, our creativity, the leadership roles in which to make space. It's also a time to embrace all the unique mixes of languages and traditions. The young lady mentioned food, music, dance is a huge part of community, right? And so for many, this is about not only celebrating Hispanic and Latino Americans, but it's about honoring their contributions. It's about honoring their identity. It's about honoring their shared heritage with each other. And so I'm hoping that this clip helps folks better understand why we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month and where we honor our Hispanic and Latino sisters and brothers. Nice. I saw hands. Any feedback? Are there ways in which you all are honoring Hispanic Heritage Month?
It's really big here in Estacia, New Mexico, as you can imagine. And you notice the young woman said Hispanics make up 17% of the US population, which I actually think is an old statistics. But in New Mexico, Hispanics are the majority of the population. So yes, this is very important here.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Chris. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello. Well, I celebrate by talking about our ancestors and drumming on our drums and growing pumpkins and things. So just whatever has been passed down from our ancestors that we have left, because we had a lot of culture washing in our family, so there wasn't much to pass down outside of alcoholism and tobacco. But we have, as our generation of kids, we've kind of were able to be far enough away from the historical trauma to, start digging out some of the, the beauty and the positivity that was also there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Rebecca. Lamont, what were you going to mention?
I think this is really timely too, because, with the presidential, this being an election year for our president, and we hear all of this fear mongering that goes on in trying to paint, Mexicans and Latino folks as violent predators. And one of the big things that they say is, oh, they're bringing all these fentanyl across the border, these quote unquote illegal aliens, right? Which is a horrible term. And I was shocked to find out that 75% of the fentanyl that comes across the border is by United States citizens. And so it's not undocumented folks and this portrayal that they try to portray. And also, if it wasn't for, our large Latino community and a lot of the undocumented immigrants, the U.S. economy was able to bounce back so quickly, both in 2008 and COVID. And something that folks don't realize too is that many undocumented neighbors will have Social Security cards and get Social Security cards, and they pay into Social Security, but they will never receive the benefits of Social Security. And so there's so many undocumented immigrants that are actually subsidizing Social Security and not being able to benefit from it. And so there's a lot of labor exploitation, especially on the farms and with farm workers, that continue. And we often don't recognize how much Latino communities and especially undocumented immigrants support our economy.
Very nicely said. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Right. If I could move forward to our recap. So during our CPNs, Community Power Networks, we like to do a recap of our last session. Why? Because folks cannot remember what they did yesterday, i.e. me. And so last month, we had the wonderful Angel and Lauren in community with us. They are from Change Matrix. They both came to share with us their reflections and learnings from the past year, right? I want to say that they led in conversation some ideas for us to think about what we want to do in the upcoming year, right? And so we spent last month generating ideas of what could this possibly look like, right? And so two concepts were introduced. We reflected on our participation in the space, right? In which we shared stories. We talked about what do we think may be most valuable in the next couple months that we could learn from or share as in this group, right? And then we reflected on another thing. We talked about, okay, if we were to create some external facing products, right? What would that look like? What format would it come in? What would have the most impact? And we talked a little bit about why those items or why those things would have the most impact. And so as a refresher, I don't know if folks remember this, but you all were able to share what our participation looked like and what would be most valuable. So you all mentioned, over the past year, some of the things that have been really valuable is emotional capacity building, learning how to build community, steps of equity-centered community design, leaning into the active listening, more community design. So what Change Matrix did was they looked at this information and they began to synthesize it. And they said, okay, what continues to show up or what continues to be a theme across some of our ideas, right? And so it were these things. It was the community-centered research strategies, steps in community-centered design, capacity building. And so what Change Matrix will do is they'll take this information, and as we grow in community together, we will be integrating these types of practices, elements, and concepts into our learning as we mature. Now, there was something else that was really important, and that we need your feedback on. Check this out. The next question was, all right, cool. We got that part. If we were able to create, what did I say? Those externally facing products, what would they be? What would they look like? Now, in this piece, we need your help because this is not about us. This is about you all. This is about community. As we think about the next year or so, right? We want to do like a poll on what you all think would be most valuable to create in the space together, right? And so Michael is getting ready to launch a poll, and I would like you all to choose what you think would be most helpful in this space. And so we're talking about letters to potential funders or philanthropic partners. This came up a lot. Folks wanted to create something around a podcast or a blog, or even presenting the information learned and shared and generated here, maybe on a national platform. Now, listen to this. We are already a national platform, right? But how do we get other partners to lean into the wonderful work that we're doing? We go present at conferences and bring folks with lived experience along in the work. And so, Michael, if you can launch that poll for us, if we could just take a minute or so to respond to what we think would be a really beneficial product for you all in your organizations to utilize, for us to begin to ideate in this space as we mature.
If folks have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, because I recognize we have a lot of new folks too.
Good point, Lamont.
Yes, Rebecca.
I'm wondering why only choosing one, because it seems like we could do all of them. And I think the presentation for a conference is already on the map, right? That's going to be in San Jose in November.
I lost the poll. I don't have it. It's not on my screen anymore.
So Rebecca, we're not necessarily presenting at the conference in November. And just to give a little bit of background for folks that are new, this group, one of the top things that they highlighted that they wanted funders to know is some of the barriers. Like, what is it like for a community-based organization or a by us, for us coalition? and to have to apply for all this funding and all these processes and not get funded and not hear back. Like, how could they reduce all those barriers to funding for small, organizations and community-based organizations doing the work? And so this group wanted to highlight that and educate funders, since Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is one of the big funders of this project and this initiative, to leverage Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and other big funders to try to decolonize the funding and make it more accessible and low barrier. Yeah.
Thank you, Lamont. Chris, I see you. But before you go, Chris, the reason why we're asking folks to choose one is because we wish we could do it all. But with resources and capacity, we can't necessarily do it all like we want to. And so if there was if you could choose one as a top priority, this is what we're trying to capture. And then, we'll look at things like first place, second place, and seeing how we can integrate, multiple things. But really, when it comes to funding and resource for this particular part of the work, we really want to focus on, one entity and do it really well. Chris, what were you going to mention?
Well, I was going to sort of respond a little bit and build on what Rebecca, I think, was saying, only because jumping into the social marketing a little early it's so strange to me to again see most people jump right to the communication channels and start thinking about how to do things. I mean, the funding piece, for example, then you had a very specific audience in the funding, but I'm not even sure a letter is the best way to address them or others. But for different people, depending on what we're trying to do, and it would be better not to have just one channel of communication.
For sure. So we're going to take that into consideration. I love that feedback. Zaza, what were you going to mention?
I wanted to ask a question. I wanted to ask the difference between, I know a podcast is, but what's a blog? I mean, I don't understand the difference.
Yeah, good question. Do folks do blogs? Do folks want to talk about how they utilize blogs? Elizabeth, I think you came off mute. For their token.
I believe that blogs are more the written version, and that certain people do them very well. And for instance, I had drawn your attention to Vu Lee's blogs, which had, he basically addresses a lot of the things that you and Lamont and everybody else here were bringing up about funding issues and things like that. So but it's still on the website, but it's print, not like radio.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the token.
Oh yeah, I was just basically gonna say the same, is that it's a printed version of, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it's just a printed version of basically what you're talking about. But one of the good things with blogs necessarily is that they are coming back. They're having a resurgence. They were very popular during the early 2000s and stuff like that. But they're now coming back because, which is good, because long form reading is coming back into necessarily the people's purview, which is great, but yeah, it's always a good way to get basically a lot, because you can say a lot over a podcast and something like that, but when it's written out, people can then take it and then continue it, because they're going to transcribe your podcast in the first place. So it's basically, we always go back to written form.
For sure, for sure. Thank you for that. All right, so Michael had relaunched the poll for folks to take. We have about almost 70%. So if you still see that poll on your screen, please vote, because Michael will be shutting it down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, Mike, let's shut it down and then show the results. All right, so it looks like, from what we see here, podcast seems to be super popular. Letter to partners, philanthropic partners is next, followed by national presentations, followed by the blog. Okay, cool. So we're gonna capture this information, share it back with Change Matrix. We'll let you all know what comes about it. But thank you for your feedback. So something else before we get into the meat of our conversation today, what Lamont would call the juicy pieces. Change Matrix is allowing us to provide feedback here, but if you need some time to like sit on it and think about it a little bit more to figure out, what may be most beneficial or impactful when it comes to the products that we create. Change Matrix has provided us with this form. Michael, can you drop the link in the chat, please? You all can respond with your name, your email, and a link to a resource or an example of something similar that we may be able to adopt in this space. And so this is another way of capturing you all's beautiful ideas and thoughts around products. Hey, Lamont.
Hey, Nastasia, I see that we have a lot of I think 2 to 3 new folks on the call. Do you mind if we take a quick moment for the new folks to introduce themselves and how did you hear about us? We want to welcome you all into this Community Power Network. Is that okay, Nastasia?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yes.
All right. I see Rebecca, I see Aaron. Any new folks? You want to introduce yourself and then how did you hear about us?
Hey, my name's Aaron. I am the Sonoma County, California Lived Experience Advisory Planning Board Chair. I heard about you all actually through Teddy Pierce and Lamont yesterday. We had Rebecca and I and Teddy took place in a conversation with Lamont and their group up there. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Aaron.
And my name's Rebecca Samet. I'm also in Sonoma County, California. And I'm the co-chair at the moment of the Lived Experience Advisory and Planning Board for our Homeless Services Division. And I heard about the network through Teddy Pierce, and she's one of our local HMIS data analysts and programmers. And yeah, I'm just learning a lot and stepping into the power of the network, and I'm really excited and revitalized to see all the work that's being done and the collaboration of breaking down the silos and uplifting our BIPOC community.
Nice, welcome.
Beautiful. Anybody else that's new?
Hi,
Hey.
my name's Caitlin. I'm really happy to be here. I heard about this group through our director, Dr. Heather Mosher, who's worked with TAC and the Community Action Hub efforts. I'm at the Youth Action Hub. We're in Connecticut, and we focus on employing young adults with lived experiences of housing instability and homelessness, and doing participatory action research around solutions related to homelessness and housing instability, and have some cool stuff going on right now that we're in the depths with. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's great to meet everyone.
Good to meet you too.
Community Action Hub is fierce in Connecticut. You work with Angel, right?
Yes, Angel, and then Alina, who I know was on earlier. I'm not sure if she's still on, but she's here as well.
Wow. We got so much people in lived experience, y'all, in the room right now, all across the nation. This is beautiful.
And then there's Dr. Espinosa. Hello.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Melissa Espinosa. I've just recently started working with the Systems Alignment Innovation Hub as a subcontractor for TAG. So hopefully I'll be seeing a lot of you more often. I do recognize a lot of the names here coming from King County and Seattle, so I know I'm in the right place. Excited to be here.
Nice. Did we get everybody that's new? Good deal. Nice. Well, welcome,
Hi,
welcome,
my
welcome,
name
welcome.
is DJ
nice.
Salaries. I'm the director of the Lives in Progress Collective at the Alliance for Citizen-Directed Supports. I heard about you from the National Leadership Consortium, the partnering organization with whom we applied for an RJWF research grant.
Wonderful. Thank you, DJ, for being here. We
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Really appreciate it. All right, so let's get into our conversation for today. Please, 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 let's do a warm welcome. Please give me some reactions, give me some energy. I would like to introduce Miss Christine Hollis. You all probably know Chris. Okay, newer folks, maybe not, but Chris has been in community with us for what? Maybe almost a year, Chris, or so? Yeah. We're talking about community-based social marketing. I personally didn't hear about this until conversations with Lamont and Chris, which introduced this concept for us. And I think, like you said, Lamont, this is coming at a really perfect time as we begin to think about our marketing strategies across our partners. And so, Chris, what is this thing? How should we be looking at it? We're ready to dive in. Oh, and let me, and if you're ready to share,
I'm
that's
ready.
cool too. Okay, take it away.
Let's all see how the technology works.
You have grace.
Okay. Can everybody see the big screen?
Nice, very nice.
Okay. One of the things I asked Nastasia, Lamont, or Michael, or whoever, when I use the big PowerPoint on this, I can't really see other people, or I can't see hands coming up, or people putting it in the chat. So I've asked them to, watch for you guys if you do have questions or whatever. And yeah, feel free to interrupt on that, but they'll be watching for those.
Now, Chris, you could go to the top right hand where you see the recording button and then the view. If you click on view, you could go down and you could see one where it could show the video of participants. It'll be at the top right hand corner next to the recording button. There's a button that says view.
And I don't really have that, Lamont.
Okay.
So I will.
We got you on this side, Chris.
Okay.
Cool.
And thank you. And Nastasia has also mentioned to me, that's why I say feel free to intervene because, if we don't finish, we can always pick it up at another time, or I can certainly talk to people independently, or then again, you may not even want to hear the rest of it. So we'll see how it goes. Just quickly, because it's been brought up, I do want to acknowledge when we're doing this, we've been talking about people with lived experience. I will fully acknowledge that I am white, and therefore I acknowledge that I'm pretty privileged throughout life, in comparison to a lot of other people. But I have also done a lot of work with people with various other kinds of lived experience and tried to learn from that as much as possible. Just so you know, in terms of the social marketing, when I go through this with you, and some of you, I'm actually curious if anybody does want to raise a thumb or something. How many of you have heard of social marketing?
Chris, I know you can't see folks, but we have one folks, Tori. Tori's heard of social marketing before.
Great. Okay. And I'll try to keep that in mind and feel free to make comments. The one thing I want to say, I've had about 25 or more years of experience in actually doing social marketing programs, from the hands-on part of it to the planning and to the management and everything. Now, two of the biggest ones that I've worked on one was in West Africa, in Cameroon, and the other one was in Guyana. So a lot of my work was overseas. And a lot of that was with women, especially mothers with very young children, because we were trying to help that with the feeding processes of young children from 0 to 5, because as most of you probably know, that's the age in which a lot of infants will die before, they grow further and everything. And then I also was part of a national children's mental health social marketing program at one time. So I have a lot of experience with it and have learned a lot of lessons over time. And the only other thing I will say that's very good about it is, and we'll talk about it, is that I have found it to be a process that is very flexible and which has adapted over the years. For example, a lot of this was used, and very similar to public health in general, in health promotion, to change individual behaviors, a lot of it. It is now moving a lot more in the direction of what we've been talking about, systems change, policy change, and those bigger pieces in that kind of piece. And it has also changed a lot of the sort of research pieces that we've talked about. I also just wanted to acknowledge that, like the rest of you, I do belong to another collaborative in New Mexico that is trying to create systems change. Many of you may already know or be involved in your states that are trying to integrate healthcare with health-related social needs. So with the community-based organizational perspective of providing services like food, housing, or maybe not the services, but help with food, housing, transportation, utilities, legal aid, all of those kinds of things, but to bring them together in what they're calling a closed-loop referral system. And where I'm sort of busy in the coalition is trying to make sure that community input and community-based organization input is integrated into, is heard first, and then integrated into the design, which will be a big healthcare system change. And I'm running into a lot of the sort of barriers that you've all talked about and everything else on that. I'll also just say, just before going ahead, is that in my field, which is health communication, and having done a lot of work with social marketing, I face a big system sort of barrier myself, in that many people in public health, in communications and everything else still want to continue doing communication in the sort of, we're telling you what to do, or we're providing you with the advice, and we want you to change, to adapt to us and what we're saying. And it's so hard for me to try to convince a lot of people to try a different approach of really listening to their consumers and, basing everything on that. So again, like many of you, sometimes I don't really feel like, despite all my hard work, I'm not having much of an impact. So what I'd just like to do as we go through this is so you can kind of get an idea of maybe a different framework or approach to better communication. This includes social media, because I know a lot of you brought that up. And also just to see how we might better address those things that you've all talked about, the factors like social drivers of health or social determinants, their root causes. And I'm going to probably focus on that a little bit more, improving equity and a lot of other things. And this method may help us with that kind of piece, I hope. Let me just ask you again, what, and Lamont, you stay out of this, and Nastasia, you stay out of this, you've already seen it. What do you think goes in the blank? And just to let you know, this came from somebody who was a participant in a focus group around a particular health issue. I'll give you that much. But what do you think would fit in that blank? And you can just shout it out if you want.
A hobby.
Okay, hobby. Anybody else?
Hope.
Hope. Anybody else? These are great.
Ben says work.
Work.
And education.
Education. Okay, I'm gonna, just for time.
DJ says community.
Community. I've heard that before. That's a good one. Actually, the word that goes in there is heroin. So you can imagine this came out of a substance kind of abuse piece. But when you look at what that person is saying, do you think a just say no message will work?
No.
What about a just do it message? How would that work?
No.
Probably not.
No.
How about what in here what you get an idea of is not so much the thing that we usually look for, which when we ask people, what are your needs? What you're really seeing here is, here are my wants. This is what makes, it important to me. And the other thing we're seeing is when we're trying to create change or look at this, my goodness, look at the competition we're up against in terms of what we offer. Aaron.
I resonate with this. I wasn't a heroin addict, but I spent 7 years as an IV methamphetamine addict, and I have 3 years clean now. That's true. When I was homeless during that period, and my day revolved around procuring my drugs. It gave me a community of people that I interacted with. Some of them I trusted, some of them I didn't. It gave me an identity. I was always figuring out how to step up my game to earn money so that I could, get what I needed. And it took up time. It took up time that otherwise I would be certainly dwelling upon the state of my life. So, yeah, and I needed to see, for me to have changed out of that, I needed to see something that made me hungry for something different than what I was doing, I guess. So there you go.
There you go. There you go. And these are, I'm just throwing this out to kind of emphasize to all of us again, we're trying to really help people change things in life and make even systems better. And just with one person like alone in something like this, look at how difficult our job is in all of that. But as Aaron said, we can possibly find the ways to do that and what's going to, motivate people to try and change. And by the way, when I say people, keep in mind, I'm also talking about policymakers. In fact, more and more about policymakers. So just to get to the basics, what is social marketing? And some of you can probably guess from the name of marketing. But social marketing is basically, it's a process. It's not a model. It's a process, but of planning, research, and management. And we do take it a lot from commercial marketing. So we use a number of commercial marketing principles. It came from when somebody way back said, well, how come we can't sell health practices the same way we sell soap? And so the idea is to take what marketing does so well, and boy, do they know their consumers, and to try and invert that to kind of, in a sense, often use it against them, but for better good. But it also uses a lot of social science techniques, and you've probably done some of the research methods that way. But it's to promote voluntary adoption of certain behaviors. Those could be the adoption of a policy that changes, the life for certain disadvantaged communities. It can be a product. It could be your own organization that you want, more members to come into or feel. It could be an idea that we're trying to get across. But voluntary adoption that will improve the well-being and the health of our particular audience, but also society as a whole in the long run. And you, again, have all been talking about systems change, so this goes into that. And we do that by offering the benefits that people want, and those may be different for different people, and reducing those barriers that we're constantly beating our heads against in a way. So that's kind of the definition, but a definition is never really enough. Now, that was social marketing, and it started more alone, and it has moved into the community-based participatory area also, because one can do the social marketing program with a variety. If you had a coalition or an organization that wanted to do this, or a particular community that had come together and said, these are things we want to make better. This is what we want to do. It's basically doing the social marketing process, but involving those members at all steps and in all pieces of the process, including doing the research, well, actually identifying a problem, doing the research around it, analyzing the data to use, designing messaging, communication channels, and all of the rest. But everybody has a say in this, and a lot of the skills, most of the skills that we've all been learning from the Community Power Network are the kinds of skills you can use with a group. in trying to facilitate all of these kinds of discussions and decisions. So literally, this is, Nastasia had mentioned again, out of that research, that a lot of you are looking for better research methods and for like capacity building. So the process of going through this with a community group is building the capacity to do a better sort of systematic, research-driven kind of process to problem solve, design, and implement more effective programs. So that's where the community-based part of this comes. And now I want to just be real clear, because a lot of people, when I say social marketing, immediately think I'm talking about social media. Social media are channels of communication. They are not a whole communication program in and of themselves. But what one can do is have social media marketing. In other words, when you sort of design your program afterwards, you may decide, as many groups are doing these days, that since so many people use social media, they do want to use those as one, at least, of their key communication channels. It is not the be-all and end-all of the social marketing program, but they can be used as channels in that way. Is this making sense to people so far? Okay. So again, I've said it was a process, and I'll bet when some of you look at this circular process on this, you're saying to yourself, yeah, but we kind of follow that when we're designing our programs and things like that. It looks pretty familiar to us. And that's true. And I want to say the one thing about this process is it's not just what we do, but how we do it and why. I really would like you to kind of keep that in mind, because there are certain principles and values in doing this that really drive this a little bit. So original planning and analysis, we really need to know in advance, what's the problem? And let me tell you, in Cameroon, when we first went out, we wanted to help mothers put more protein in the weaning foods. Well, we had to first look around at the whole environment they were living in, which was out in semi-desert, and say, do they even grow the kind of crops? Do they even have the kind of animals around or anything else? Because if they didn't, it wasn't a communication issue. It was more of an agricultural one or something else at that point. So knowing what you can really address. Even if you could do a quick community assessment, you can do situational analysis, even if your community group does a SWOT, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats kind of process together, you would still have a much better picture of your environment. And then designing how you want to do the formative research. The reason the name is formative research is that you are now gathering information or data, as most of us try to say, from the key groups of people you really want to be helped in all of this to improve their situation, especially in terms of equity and things like that. You're trying to get the information that can help you form your intervention or we'll talk about a product in just a moment, your services, your messages, everything else. So that's to form these things. The other thing is to decide who is most affected by this in some ways. Who do we really need to reach? And we'll talk a little bit more about the audience segmentation in a bit. And then use all of this information we've collected to analyze it and design, what we're going to do in research. And some of you have done this kind of formative research. I think most of you know, like, what a focus group is, I'm sure. Other things to be thinking about that aren't as costly could be observation methods. I once did that for repetitive strain injuries with people on computers, of watching how they sat, how they used their hands, things like that. Some of you may have used like photo voice. These are all things that involve your community in the research and thinking about the reasons why it's happening. Could be journey mapping or root cause analysis, which we've started doing here, and it really gets people thinking. But anyway, there are lots of different ways to go about this. once we get that kind of information, we need to sit down and figure out, what is it telling us? What have we learned about, kind of like what Aaron said, what might motivate these people? What have they mentioned that's really important to them, or what their want is right now, like for their children, for their family, for anything else? What are the benefits that we might be able to explain in terms of change? And what's getting in the way of all of this? Is it way down under with root causes with, racism, classism, all of those kinds of things? Or is it something, else sometimes, like how well received are you in a doctor's office if you are Black, or if you are American Indian, or things like that? These are a lot of different things. And then setting, how we're going to stand out the field, and then design our strategic marketing plan. Oh, this is great. I've got pictures, people, so I don't see. But basically, this is where you also, because of what people told you, like where they want to get their information, who do they trust for information things, design the messaging from what they've given us as information, and also what are the best channels to use with people in different, groupings. We also think about sort of the product and the other piece. But we do this, we put it together, we think of our timeline and everything else, and then we try to implement it. If we can do a pilot, great. If not, move ahead. And then again, as you're all familiar with, as you're implementing the program, we want to have the budget set out, our time frame, develop, but we also want to monitor. We want to see how things are going, what is not working, those kinds of pieces and everything. Make adjustments as we go along, and then evaluate for outcomes. It's not just process evaluation we do, but also outcome. Let me ask you, just real quick, what's the goal of commercial marketing? What basically do they want us to do?
Buy.
Buy.
Spend our money.
Buy something and keep using it.
Buy stuff.
Don't just buy it once, buy it again and again and do that. So that's the goal of commercial marketing, but keep in mind, that's a behavior. They actually action, do something. Somebody ask a question or say something?
I said brand loyalty. They want you to keep coming back and utilize only theirs.
Yes. Yes. And you're going to want that in social marketing at some point, a brand loyalty, if you have one. Now, for social marketing, we want to move people to perform and sustain a change that's, much more positive. Now, again, people can be like policymakers, big decision makers, groups that are pushing a certain agenda or pushing, other kinds of things that can be major barriers to us. But we do that also to inform the design of effective policy. We may feel that something is needed, but we want to get some information from the community it's going to affect very much also, and, be able to have that to move system change and behavior change forward. You'll also notice that some of my examples in here are going to be much more health related, mainly just because I come out of public health. But again, and I don't want to spend much time on this, but what you usually see, and I always do in health promotion and things like that, in education, we try to constantly give information to people, and, we don't really bother with what they're going to do, but it's up, we're the ones that are telling them what to do. We're the educators. You've probably always heard the explanation, well, we just have to educate them, which to me is like fingernails grating on a board or something. But with social marketing, it's more about persuading them from their own viewpoint. And our bottom line is results. It's not that we don't care that they are not going to do it. I mean, it is a choice on their part, but we really care about seeing change. Audience research, the more you pay attention to what people are asking all the time, whether it's a survey or a community listening group or something, we tend to focus on what they do and also what they need. We constantly are asking, well, what do you need for your family? What do you need in the community? In audience research in social marketing, we want to look a lot more at the why. why do you do such and such, or why don't you do such and such? And that can even be, again, a politician. Is it because you're afraid you'll lose voters, or financial support or whatever? And also look at wants. What do you want for your children? When I was in development and overseas in a village, they were trying to get them to try and take steps towards, preventing diabetes. Finally asked the villagers what they wanted because they were getting resistance. And the people said, we want a soccer field in our village. Once they helped the people build that soccer field, they could move ahead with people on a lot of other things. We tend in education and promotion focus a lot on when we're telling our funders, for example, things. Here are the numbers that we reached. Here are the number of people we trained. Here are the number of pamphlets we distributed. Here are the number of messages we got out on the radio. Those kinds of things. Social marketing wants to really look at the outcome. What kind of percent change did we see? Did we actually see improvement in people's lives? Those kinds of things. And again, education and promotion, and I'm saying this from my own experience of being in health promotion for a long time, we want to change that consumer, change your behavior. Whereas what social marketing tries to do is fit the product and our messaging to what the consumer really wants to hear or what will be best heard by those people. So these are some of the how and why differences. Again, this is just a basic of social marketing. You will probably hear of the 4 Ps, and that's usually we start with product. Once we've got information from the audience at times, what is our, if you want, a service? What is our service going to be like? What do we need to offer people? What do we need to offer to the policymakers? It's not, we find out maybe it's not enough to just give them data all the time, or even just tell them what consumers reported in a consumer listening group or something. They need more, and it needs to motivate them. Or a behavior. In my case, for example, in the 2 programs it was getting mothers to continue breastfeeding for a long time, or to add more protein to the gruel that they would give to the children growing up. What about your organization? If you want your members to join your group, things like that. And we also have to think of what are the benefits of our organization or the benefits of our product or our service? Why is our service better than others? And what are the attributes of that? We also have to consider the price. We've talked to so many people. One of the biggest barriers I hear all the time, and I'm sure you have, is there may be services there for people, but no transportation. How do we overcome that? Or how do we help people overcome that? There's been an interesting program in Albuquerque where youth managed to get the transportation, the buses offered free to youth for certain, services they needed to go get. For a lot of people, it could be cost. Some of it, I'm finding these days, time. It's just so hard for people to take the time to do certain things. Place is something we often don't think about as much. How are people going to access our service? Okay, this goes back to the transportation, for example. Access in New Mexico in particular, healthcare services, when you're in a rural or frontier area, aren't too many services out there, and people have to drive, like 2-3 hours to get to these things. And it's not just access in the physical sense, but also in the fact that, a lot of people are turned away from services. We're full, or you don't meet the enrollment qualifications or things like that. We need to think about our outreach force. A lot of people in health tend to think a lot of community health workers, navigators, people like that. I'm sure you may have used them. The availability of these kinds of, our services, let's say, or our behaviors or organization and things. And finally, getting to the promotion, what are going to be the channels that we use that people are more likely to get information from? What is the messaging? What are incentives that we might offer? And I just stuck in because it becomes more and more important, kind of a fifth P in these days, or policy. And how do we address that? So literally what we're trying to do is maximize a package of benefits, whatever our product is. And a product, again, as I said, it could be an organization, it could be an idea or an ideal like Amnesty International, what they're promoting. It could be actually a product. Overseas, there were huge social marketing programs to promote condom use and oral rehydration therapy for babies with diarrhea and everything. And they were huge social marketing programs. The other thing is, I've kind of found it's very funny when we're trying right now to promote the collaborative that I'm in, the New Mexico Social Drivers of Health Collaborative. And I've asked some of the members there to try and sell, if you will, the collaborative, because we really want community members in. And what they will do is, most of them will sit there and give me, well, the collaborative is a group of healthcare people, community-based organizations, researchers, blah, 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 coming together to make New Mexico better for people. And I'm sitting there going, but what if we said, this collaborative is the only member-driven nonprofit in New Mexico that has been designated by the state government to provide community input into the design of a closed-loop referral system. Do you kind of see the difference in that? I'm sorry, Aaron?
Yeah, here in Sonoma County, California, our lived experience board, we're trying to promote the idea right now of, and Rebecca's done a lot of hard work on this. We're trying to promote the idea right now of having an independent board to handle the grievance policies of all of our homeless service providers, so that they're not doing their own. The conflict of interest are immense a lot of times. So if we could do that, then when somebody gets kicked out of a shelter, we can go back in and on their behalf and see if the process went through and as it was supposed to. We don't want there to be barriers like people worried about retaliation if they fill out a grievance form. We're trying to find a way to take it out of the hands and put it in those people of special interest and put it into an independent group that has no special interest in it, so that it's fair. And I think that would be the product that we're trying to promote, is that change of doing things.
Because what you're trying to say is, when you get that kind of information, you should be able to use it to make improvements in the system.
But just convincing the continuum of care here to make those changes is like an uphill battle. So
it is. No, I hear you. But you know what? For something like a closed loop referral system, and I know California is way ahead of most of us on that, you do need that kind of information, because just referring people to like a center that can help them with homelessness, if they're not well received, or if they're told that they're too full up, they can't take people, if they're not, very nice or anything else, I mean, you're not helping people access better services. Yeah, I think what you're doing is very important, but I hear you on the barriers. And that's this next one, is trying to figure out how to minimize those barriers. That's the price that both we and the people have to pay. So how, and I'll tell you, the biggest one I find over and over, and nobody seems to be able to figure it out really well, is the one of transportation. And that's, again, I think that's a system thing of how we've set up the United States, so that everybody needs their own car. But then the other piece is to, set up the sort of distribution channels to enhance better outreach and convenience of place. And I'll show some examples in a minute. We also need to, promote the messages. We need to get out there and show the superiority of your process, let's say, Aaron, to something else that makes the information you gather maybe much more useful. Anyone else have a comment or question? And I'm trying to give examples as I go along. Here are some of the really key concepts that I think we tend to forget a lot in regular health promotion and health education. Is the social marketing really pushes on the consumer driven. I have seen so many community-based organizations in the goodness of their hearts going out and saying they don't really use the term focus groups anymore, and it's just as well, because they literally are trying to have a conversation with people, and particularly, people in MAID disadvantaged communities and everything else, but they ask very broad, open questions, such as what are your needs in the community, which are very hard for people to answer. And they don't, if you want, probe enough into that of the sort of whys. Why does it, that kind of piece, why do you think that's happening here? What gets in the way? Social marketing says you will get the needed information, from your consumers. In that case, it can be your community members, whatever, but you will use that information. You will go back and you will learn from it, and you will use it in messaging, program design, and everything else. Behavior focused. And again, so many programs I see are very satisfied to raise awareness. It's not enough. What we're focused on here is behavior change, whether that's in policy making, system change, or getting mothers to try and feed their babies differently. But we're focused on action of moving forward. Exchange-based, I've begun to think I have to do something with this, because everybody now is talking much more about transformation rather than the sort of exchange-based thing. But quite frankly, we do need to make sure that the benefits are bigger or better than the barriers in a lot of this. Because people, really, if they're going to change, if they're going to do something, they need to know, what do they get out of it in this way? And that would definitely be for a policymaker in person. So research driven. And again, we'll talk a little bit more, but research driven. And again, we're not talking about academic research here in general. We are talking about research that will give us what is needed to design and set up messaging programs and everything else, listening to people. It's to be useful, using that information. And competition aware, if you think back to the heroin piece, just like Aaron and others were thinking, these are some of the barriers that stand in our way. What is it that people are doing that is not what we're hoping people will do, or a way they're keeping the system going that's really harmful, for other people? But why are we doing that? That's our competition. And that's usually the hardest place to try and get at that. And again, I just throw this in because I don't know how many groups I've worked with that say, yeah, we should talk to, the community, we should do this. And, yeah, we don't have the money, we don't have the funding, we don't have the resources. We'll just depend on what we know about them, or things like that. So I just encourage you to do it. One good thing in the beginning, if we go back to the research we were talking about, is try to know what the heck is going on around us, especially if we want systems change. What are the things going on in life? What's our history? I think we've seen a lot of this with the racism piece and everything, is our history in how that goes, and colonialization and pieces like that. But what does it mean to us? What are the trends? What are the forces in the internal and external environment? Look at the election coming up. Our environment's going to change quite a bit depending on who is elected. And that will mean either, some greater opportunities for some things, or our barriers may get even greater. It really, we have to look at what's going on out there and how do we adjust to that kind of thing? How relevant is it? You could do community assessments. You can try to do other kinds of pieces. I think I've mentioned a couple of other types of, community-based research that doesn't cost a lot, but can probably give you good information. So again, back to, we need to know, what is the problem? And the problem, a lot of times I've seen these trees, we sometimes get caught on the symptoms of what is actually the problem, and we tend to just focus on those. What are the underlying root causes? And that's when you start really getting into our infrastructure, attitudes like racism, classism, other things, of trauma, of all kinds of other things in there that really, but a lot of it to me are policies. Policies like redlining that have, excluded people from certain housing areas, things like that. But what's the real underlying root cause? What is the extent of this problem? Who is most affected by it in a negative way? How many? What are the upstream, just like we were just talking about, what are the upstream factors that influence this? And those could also be root causes. And we may also just need to ask people, what kinds of solutions might you propose? I think, have most of you ever heard the story of the fishermen that were out and they were having a great time fishing, and all of a sudden they started seeing all these people coming in the river down there, drowning in the river and everything. So they immediately start hauling them out, and the solution was to keep them from drowning, and they kept pulling them out, but more and more people kept coming. And finally, one of the fishermen starts walking back up the river, and they go, "Wait, where are you going? What are you, where are you? Why are you leaving us?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to go and find out why these people are falling in the river and drowning so that we can do something about it." So that's, I think, what we're trying to do with this kind of thinking. And if you think about it, again, you can see that a lot of mine is focused kind of on a health thing, but we tend to use a lot of outcome data. What's our teen birth rate? What are graduation rates? What's the poverty rate? The diabetes rate? Who are poor communities? Where are they found? If you just know those outcomes, like if you know that, the teen birth rate in your county is very high, is that enough for you to kind of design a program that might bring the teen birth rate down? Just asking for your thoughts.
No.
Thank you, Lamont. Anyone else? It could be different things. Many people would say, well, they're not getting sexuality education in the classes, so that's it. And then you find out that, well, actually, that may be, but they're not selling birth control in any of the stores in an area where, youth might get them or something. So you need to know the reason. Aaron.
It could be cultural barriers such as not being open about discussing sexuality in the family. It could be lack of access to birth control or education about how birth control works and why maybe you might want to use it. And if your family's not going to talk about it because it's taboo, it's not going to happen. You're just going to have kids. And it could also be a religious barrier because of the birth control.
And these are quite often the cultural and the religious and other things like that are often sometimes the hardest to kind of get at and everything. But you're right. And the other thing is, you've just pointed out, you can't just use one message like, just say no or something. You've got to address each of those factors that's relevant. So that's why we want to look upstream and say, what are some of the causes for this? What kind of systems do we have in place, like in terms of education on this? What are policies? You could have community governments, county governments that are saying, we're not having those condoms sold here in our area or anything else. So we need to go back up and figure out, just like you said, and if there are cultural issues, class issues, anything like that, we need to know. Mustafa.
Hi, I just have questions. You said this is in Africa. Does it work like this here? Because the system is corrupt here. And what I see in my experience for 15 years here, nothing changed. People same, the government is same. nothing changed. If you are not compassion to help your people, nothing changed. Like when I saw the refugees, immigrants, asylum seeker, homelessness, nothing, it's same things, repeated. I go to the street, same thing. I never see any change this for 15 years. So I'm really fed up from the system in America for all these things. That's why I decided to go, outside America, because nothing changed. You can change people's life in Africa and or Middle East or wherever that is the goal. But here, I don't see any things. That's why I don't like, just blah, blah, blah words. Actions speak than words. But the politics, they control everything. And they control media, all these things. So my question is, if it is working, that's the model to you in Africa, does it work like here because of the policy and the government or not? Or are we going to change? It's going to be changed because this is 15 years. I don't see any change. And thank you for listening.
No, I hear you, Mustafa, and let me tell you, I'm probably as frustrated as you with the lack of change and everything, to the point that I'm really considering getting out of the collaborative that I'm in, and a lot of others, just because things don't change. And I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall. But Mustafa, I want to be clear, and I hope I didn't give this impression to everybody. This is not about doing something in Africa or the Middle East, or this is everywhere. And I have done these programs here in the United States too. The thing is that back when social marketing got started, and it was started by people who were in commercial marketing that started thinking about, things are not working. This may be a better way to do it. And when they started doing this and creating programs, and I can tell you in New Mexico, one of the first was done in New Mexico by a man who was very well known in the field. And it was back in the 1970s. When I was doing this work overseas, it was in the 80s. The reason we were doing the work overseas was because USAID said, we like this idea. This is great. And we're going to fund it and we're going to move it forward. And it got funded, and we learned many lessons from there. We all tried to bring it back to the United States. And I have to say that there have been, the CDC in particular, worked to promote it as widely as possible and with other groups. So it has been done here, Mustafa. This process can be done anywhere. You just adjust it, as Aaron has said, to the cultures, to the different groups of people you're working with, and everything else. It is flexible and adaptable. But I don't mean to say that it only works in like another country. It doesn't. It was developed here. It came back to the United States. CDC promoted. In fact, social marketing, if you remember, we're always being pushed to do evidence-based programming. Social marketing was one of the first that CDC put on the list of evidence-based programs that are proven to be effective. It's just that I found, especially in the States, nobody does it right, except some academics who really understand, like some university groups.
Correct.
But then it doesn't usually go further on change. And I have seen a lot of programs called social marketing that, in my opinion, are not, because they don't go to what I was just talking about, the how we do things and why. I have seen so many people out doing what they call community listening groups that don't give you the kind of information you really need to move things forward. And they don't even analyze the data to do something with it. They don't really listen to the people that they're hearing to say, here's what they're telling us, we should move on that. I'm not sure, Mustafa, but let me tell you, I definitely share your frustration. And I think that's what I was trying to say also, is all the time I've been in public health and I've done health promotion and everything else. I even tried to put social marketing in the guide for the new DOH health promotion specialists about social marketing. They wouldn't put it in. They want to continue doing things their own way. So the piece that we're all talking about, systems change, it is really difficult.
Yeah, I know. That's what I want. Because if I can come after 10 years of all you guys, I will see same you guys, same position, same things, nothing due to the people. Because the system is corrupt, the policy, the control everything, the government control. Because this is what I learned. I mean, I understand it. That's correct me if I'm wrong. It's depend on the funding. So if you don't have funding, you're corrupt. You cannot do anything. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I can't really correct a statement that broad. I think there are people that are becoming more awake to
Yes,
this.
I'm with you. This is
Time.
education awareness. Yes, awake.
And
Yes.
And I would hope that even in a small sense, if one starts small with a community of some kind and tries to work it through, and that's what I say. I think it's important with this kind of piece to do the capacity building with community groups so that they can do this themselves and then start branching out to, do more. I will, if people don't have it, I'm happy to share, for example, an exercise in which you might be able to get community members to start or hell, if you can get the policymakers or decision makers together to start analyzing root causes. It's called a why session. You keep going down and stuff. But that's, I think, where we have to start digging much deeper into those things and start being much more vocal about those in the kind of messaging and communication pieces that we're doing. I just want to say very quickly, Nastasia, I note that we are at almost 1 o'clock. What would you like to do at this point? I can stop.
Question.
I'm probably about what, halfway through?
Exactly. We always need more time. What were you saying, Lamont? I'm sorry.
Well, I was wondering if we should continue during the community office hours, which is coming up. When is that? Next week?
On the 4th. So how about we do this? Very, very nice suggestion. How about we it sounds like there's a part 2 that's needed for this. And so let's stop here and next month pick up where we left off. But to Lamont's point, the community hours are next week. I want to say October 3rd. Join us there. We'll be talking about what Chris has facilitated on and how we can utilize that in practice. And you all are welcome to come. Michael will make sure you all have the registration link to the community hours for you all to lean in. All right.
Also, Nastasia, folks, I see some folks messaging too that they want to be kept in the loop with the emails and invites. Is there a link that goes into the chat for them to put their contact information, or how does that work?
Yes, Michael. I'm going to give this over to Michael. Michael handles all the things communication-wise.
Hello, thank you, Nastasia. I'm about to put in the chat for everybody a link to our Community Power Network registration form. We launched this a few months ago for individuals to be able to get on that mailing list and get access to these new calendar invites. So I will post that here in the chat momentarily, and once we get that email from you, we'll get you signed up for both those things. Thank you.
And just so everybody knows, I mean, I'm hoping I know this has been very long and somewhat tedious. I actually hope in the next section to be able to give you more examples of some of the stuff that's been done.
This has been great, Chris. And folks want the slides too. You were presenting earlier, but there were several comments in the chat. I think Tamara was saying how this is really relevant to a project that she's working on. And so this has been so helpful. It's been amazing.
Yeah. So we'll talk about resource sharing a little bit later. You all, this was going to be recorded, so you'll have access to the recording. Chris is going to work with our team to generate resources based on what she facilitated today. Chris, do you want to close us out with any last remarks?
No, other than to say, in case you can't make it to the part 2 of this or whatever, I'm basically retired, although still working with, the collaborative, and like Mustafa says, beating my head against the wall in some cases. But I am also, if like some of you said, if you have something that's coming up in your work and you might want to talk about it with me or just discuss it, I'm willing to do that. and just, see what my thoughts might be if they can help you at all.
Wow. That is amazing.
Other than that,
this is great. Y'all, let's give Chris some love. This has been so amazing. Thank you, Chris. This has been so powerful. You're such an excellent teacher. And to keep in mind, too, if y'all have some wisdom, something you want to share with us, because this space is all about us sharing wisdom with each other. So just let Nastasia know if there's something that you would like to share with the group so we could strengthen each other.
Until next time, you all have a good one. Take care.